right, all right, all right.
Yes.
Everybody, we had to set the
Hello.
vibes. We had to set the vibes.
Yes, I'm over here swaying like, okay.
Badu always, first of all, relaxes me. Miss Erica Badu always relaxes me,
Yes.
puts me, she grounds me back. So we definitely had to start off with my good girl, Miss Erica Badu. How you feeling today, Ebony?
I'm good. I can't complain. We are one day away from spring break, so we are hanging on by a thread, girl.
By a string. Oh,
Yes.
what is a thread? I guess it's exactly what it is. A thin
Yes.
thread you could think of.
Woo.
We're hanging on by that. And
Hanging on, girl.
I'm so thankful that we are going to be on spring break very, very soon.
Same.
Yes, but welcome everybody to episode numero 2 of Black Ed Talks, presented to you by BU.
That's right.
Right.
Yes. So Black Ed Talks is where the conversation is about serving, influencing, and impacting education.
All right, so that means we have a whole bunch of different people that we are going to be calling on to the show. We have some great guests for you tonight. But first and foremost, if you don't know, you're about to know who your awesome hosts are. All right, so my name is Alexa Ashiel. I'm an educator, artist, and organizer. I'm the founder of the Black Educators Collaborative, aka the Collabo. The key word for myself and Miss Ebony is multifaceted because we do a lot of things. Okay, so tell them what you do. Run your resume, Ebony.
My name is Ebony Woods. Like Alexa, I'm also a teacher. I'm an author. I'm a founder of the nonprofit A Vision to Empower. And just like she said, we are multifaceted. We are getting it done.
Right. And tonight we're going to have an awesome conversation centered on curriculum, but specifically one of BU's 7 actionable agenda items, which is mandating the integration of Black history, civics, and social justice for students K through 12. All right, so tonight we have some awesome guests, and I'm actually going to let them into the room, and then we'll introduce them. So let's give a round of applause as I admit our 2 guests for the night.
Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Alexa, we're going to have to take this show on a road.
We're going to have to go on tour, right?
Yes, girl.
All right. So as one of our guests connects to audio and gets everything all situated, Miss Ebony, why don't you shine the light on our first guest for the night?
Well, I'm so happy to introduce our first guest, her name is Keisha Green-Martinez. She is the AP. She is an author. Her book is so fabulous. It is called His Name is Quincy. She's a mother. She's a wife. She's a friend, a sister, multifaceted like us. I'm talking about, we got these bomb women in here tonight. Keisha, tell them something that I left out, boo.
I think you just about captured everything. So yeah, my name is Keisha Green-Martinez. I am a mom, as Ebony stated, of 3 of God's most precious gifts to ever walk the face of this earth. They are my world. They are my everything. I am an educator, been an educator for over 20 years. I'm an advocate. I'm a champion. Excuse me, what was that? I'm definitely a champion for children, a champion for education. I'm an author. Here's my book. You should definitely check it out.
His name is
This is what I'm saying.
Let me put it close. Get in. His name was Quincy. It is a must read. And I'm not just saying that because I wrote it myself, but definitely reflective of our times and a helpful conversation starter. I'm a little bit of everything. I'm into everything. Lifelong learner. I'm working on my doctorate, so please pray for me.
Yes, girl.
I'm ready to get in the game and step up, get some policies made that's going to help our people.
That's right. That's why we're here tonight.
Exactly. And again, the key word of the night seems to be multifaceted. So I'm going to segue now to introduce everybody to our next guest, Mr. Kaya Royale. Please let me know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He reigns from Brooklyn, New York. He is a Navy veteran. Shout out to our veterans. Okay,
Yes.
he has a BBA in accounting from Adelphi University. Excuse me. It's been a day, like I said earlier. He's part of the Parent Association at Henry Highland Garnet Elementary School, and also a part of the student leadership team, the curriculum chairman at Henry Highland Garnet Elementary. Now, Mr. Kayal, go ahead, shine the light on yourself. Fill in anything that I missed. Edit anything I might have said wrong. Let the people know who you are.
Well, people have been calling me Royale since I was in kindergarten. It's just Royal, but they think it has to be fancier than what it is. Royale, I guess from Pulp Fiction, Royale with cheese. Everyone always says that. But I'm from Brooklyn. You know, Brooklyn always like to represent. I live in Harlem, but I can't claim Harlem. I'm gonna help them. I'm gonna do everything. I got their back, but I'm a Brooklyn boy. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I am the oldest of 4 boys, and I helped raise my brothers in Brooklyn, New York. That was quite a task, you know, growing up in the 90s in Brooklyn. It's very different now. It's so gentrified now. Very, very different. But as far as this conversation goes, I was always interested in, I don't want to just say social justice, but economic equity for Black people. And I don't know, maybe a light bulb or something went off, something that I always knew I had inside me, that I started to become more active at Henry Highland Garnet, because I would sit on the sidelines in the past and you would see so many things that are being done and you just can't believe your eyes. And I said, you know what? Well, are you going to be that change? Are you going to do? And here I am to be that change, to implement a lot of the policies, to stop a lot of the antiquated things that we have seen that, you know, certainly need to change. So here I am, and I can't wait to contribute to the conversation tonight.
Yes. Well, thank you for that. I mean, I think I can speak for almost everyone in the room.
Royal, I just wanted to say hi.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, hello.
Thank you both for joining us. And, you know, I think the times that we are in have now shifted and allowed us to think about why we're in education, why are we wanting change in education, and why we want to be the voice of education. So after you guys just told us a bit about yourself, tell us what brought you into education, right? Keisha, what brought you into education?
How much time we have?
We'll keep our answers concise because I know that you guys.
All right. So basically, all right. So basically, I came into education because of my upbringing, right? With my dad, we're all Jamaican, and we came here to America, and we've always had like there was always a strong family value related to education, right? Education is your way to get ahead. So that really prompted me to want to go into education. And then my experience of becoming a teen mom at a very young age, and just always remembering the educators that advocated for me, that pushed me for greatness, and my own family, especially my dad, 100% prompted me to get into education. And just going through the education system also, and knowing the values that were instilled in me from home, and going into school and seeing the contradiction, I'm like, nah, somebody else needs to be here telling our kids our story from our perspective, because this sure isn't the way I'm getting it at home. So how comes the history that I'm learning from home and the history I'm learning in school isn't meshing? Like, so that was always something that I'm like, even as a kid, I'm like, something isn't right. So I definitely wanted to get into the system and really work to change the system in that way. So I would say what brought me, my dad, other educators that rallied around me and supported and knew that my big mouth was going to be of an asset in the future. And that even though I was brushing against philosophies that were occurring in school, they understood that and valued that. And not all educators welcome that. Ebony, you might know my history. Like I've been out the school system more than I could count. So, but I would say that's what brought me, and my son, becoming a teen mom and just seeing the system. I was like, nope, got to get in.
And Kaya, what brought you to education? What made you want to rally and sit on boards? Now, I'm a parent, just like Keisha, and I've sat on a few boards in schools, and I'm like, I'm not doing this no more. The principal just want us here to pass their thoughts through, and this is okay. So what has prompted you to be in education, to be that voice for your children?
Well, one, I'm a father now, and I have one daughter, and she's in 3K. But I'll tell you a quick story. And I reflected on this before I made my decision to actually get more involved. When I was in high school, I went to Sheepshead Bay High School in Brooklyn, New York. And I was always outspoken, always the troublemaker in class, that good trouble. And I remember his name was Mr. Herman, Jewish guy, was my teacher, history teacher. And he says, we were talking about slavery and the treatment of Black people during that time. And, it, you know, they always cover it for just a very split second and they move on. And I wanted to go deeper into it. And he says to me, he says, and I was trying to say, listen, you need to focus on the treatment of Black people. It was terrible, you know, and I'm just a 15-year-old kid. And he says, Kaya, let me ask you something. He says, if you had a BMW, would you drive it into that back wall? Looking at him confused and says, no, of course not. What are you talking about? He goes, exactly. He says, slaves were very expensive and the average person didn't own a slave. So would you damage your property to the extent that it could not perform? So I sat back with my jaw dropped. So essentially what he was saying was that the treatment of Blacks in slavery was exaggerated historically. And that because they were so expensive that people would not damage their property, that they could not reap the value of that property. Now, looking back at that, 20 years ago, whenever it was, you know, he would have been dismissed immediately today. But I thought about confrontations and situations that I've had throughout life similar to that. And I says, well, listen, this could be a way to make your voice heard and put some of your ideas out there. And I'm sick and tired of seeing young Black men, young Black girls go to school and essentially being taught to worship white folks.
That's right.
With this Eurocentric, you know, curriculum. George Washington was great. You praise him. No, he owned some people that looked like you. The founding fathers are heroes. You're not supposed to say anything wrong. Abraham Lincoln is your hero. That's not true. So I'm going to do everything that I can to tell everyone that that's not true. It's the truth.
Okay, well, the first thing I want to say is that we all full of good trouble in here.
That's right. That's
right. When I was little, I was reflecting a little bit ago about when I was younger and how my mom would always say, you always take the other person's side, or you always rooting for the underdog. And at the time I was like, well, you know, I didn't have the words to say like, well, maybe they need a voice or they have a perspective too. So I look back and it's like, you know, I was kind of like a rebel rouser myself. And I think that might be the markings of people who get into this field, become educators. And even if you're not like directly an educator, have interest in making sure that our students and our people are being given the knowledge that they need. And so actually, Kaya, your response leads us right into the next question, or really discussion topic, because this is supposed to be a discussion between all four of us. All right. It's not just me and Ebony grilling y'all with questions. We're going to have a discussion about this. The first discussion topic is, what is the importance of representation in academics? Why should we focus so much on making sure that we are represented in this space? What do y'all think about that?
Yeah. And anyone can answer.
Well, why should we be represented in academics? Well, I believe that if we don't, it's not just so much that it's academics, but academics is extremely important because essentially for Black people, we are at a disadvantage anyway. And we need to have that academics. We need to have that to do anything, to become anything. And it doesn't, I'm not necessarily talking about this, the traditional 4-year degree, but we need to have some form of instruction in order to become something. And what I have seen is that sometimes I believe that it has been used, and I know many people won't like this, it has been used to keep a lot of Black people, specifically young Black boys, Black men, in their place. So what I'm referring to is the school to prison pipeline.
That's right.
That's what I'm referring to. The No Child Left Behind Act. That was a big mistake. It didn't work. It doesn't work. It's not working. And I spoke about this at our last meeting, the cognitive dissonance. Why these are things that we need to address that are affecting specifically Black children. I don't care what data you look at. Unilaterally, of course, you can pick any data you want. Mm-hmm. You will more time than not find that Black people are at the bottom performers on any chart that they have. And we need to ask ourselves, why? How could it be that a people who has such rich history of civilizing the world, that's right, the Hamites teaching the Greeks, the Moors teaching the Romans, and now all of a sudden we're essentially dumb? No, that can't be. Right. Something's wrong. Something is definitely wrong. So the way that we're being taught, the cognitive dissonance, because children who experience cognitive dissonance will sit back in the class. They won't pay attention. They're labeled bad kids, a badass. They are diagnosed with IEPs and they don't have them. But they think that because they don't fit in this particular way of learning, this curriculum that they deem to be acceptable and the standard for everyone, that, well, you people just can't get with the program. So this is extremely important that we reverse this cycle to change our academics. And I think that it's like a domino effect. We will start to see real equity. I don't say equality, I say equity.
Right.
It is not equality. People make a mistake by asking for equality. We are fundamentally unequal parts. That's right. So any distribution of wealth and resources perpetuates it's an unequal amount. Equity is what we need. So that's why I think academics is the key.
You better follow up on Mr. Royal. All right, you said a word, but there are two things that I always tell people I'm not looking for. I'm not looking for equity and I'm not looking for tolerance.
That's right.
Those are two things that I'm definitely not looking for. I would say that in response to your question, and I think it was why do we need representation in academics? I think that we can't talk about representation in academics without thinking about the unintended consequences of Brown versus Board of Ed, right? Prior to that, Black teachers, Black educators were educating Black children and were doing so successfully.
That's right.
That wasn't the issue. The issue was more about the resources. And what happened is something that I can relate back to what Mr. Royal said. When did we become not fit to educate children? And people really don't understand the impact and how it even plays out to today when you look at the disparity in terms of the minorities that are in schools educating system, educating children. And that dates back to that decision from back then when many Black educators lost their jobs because they weren't fit to teach white children. So I think it's important because our children need to see us, right? I think from watching children, I think children are cognitively boycotting classes.
I can say that's the truth because I'm in class. These kids is like, miss.
In the bed.
They're sitting in the classrooms, but they're not engaging with the work. And sometimes I think we have to think about who is the content coming from and what is the content saying. I remember sitting in a class the other day and we were talking about something and they were talking about equal rights and who has voice and who's allowed to say what. Now imagine that topic coming from a white educator telling me you have a right to equal voice. You can say like that doesn't fly. So children aren't connecting sometimes with educators that are giving them this curriculum because they can't see themselves in the educators. They can't see themselves in the curriculum. So I think it's important that we are represented in the field of education. We want our children to see that we are Black educators. We are Black, we are dope, we're brilliant. We have, it's so much that we could do, and that we can stand in those places and still be ourselves unapologetically while being Black and being educators. So I think it's important that we do represent, and I see it every day when little Black girls are saying, oh my God, you're my favorite teacher. When I step inside their classrooms and I'm not even a teacher inside that classroom.
Right.
I'm just there to do an observation. And, you know, they're like, oh my God, when are you coming back? So they need to see us. They really do need to see us.
Yeah, you know, I kind of want to piggyback off that because we have two like interlinking things happening right now. We have representation in the curriculum, which is what Kaya was kind of alluding to, and we have representation in actual like being a teacher in the space. And so personally, I teach high schoolers. I teach 9th and 11th graders. And so my 11th grade class, we teach US history. And right now we're talking about Reconstruction. All right. And so it's like one of my favorite units to teach because I'm like, y'all, like this was the time, like this was it. And this is what set us up to be where we are as a nation right now. And so I do make it I make it so important that when we're talking about the early America all the way up to Reconstruction, that these kids aren't just berated with the slave narrative. However, it makes it tough when the kids are cognitively boycotting my class because at this time they're already juniors. They're already 16, 17, 18 years old. They've already been through all this education system. And I could be the first person coming in here like, slavery is not the only story. That's not the only story of Black people in America.
My story.
And that's why I'm so hyped talking about Reconstruction, because you see that right after slavery, we're becoming politicians. We're ruling the world. Like, look at what's happening. And, you know, I'm giving all this energy and they just looking at me like, either like this lady is crazy or like, you know, she got a little bit too much energy. But I think it's both of what you're saying is that it can't be the random one-off teachers, right? Giving them the random one-off information, the random one-off Black teacher that's like, this is not who you are. It really has to start, that representation needs to begin at little kids, at children. It needs to start before they get to me in high school, so that finally, when we're talking about this Reconstruction in Alexa and Eric's class, we can actually have a more in-depth conversation because they've been engaged in these kinds of conversation over the course of the education. So that's just a point that I wanted to go to.
It's important because also like you're starting, your daughter, Kaya is in 3K. So you starting this journey now, which is amazing. So everyone who now her 3K class, when they become pre-K and it moves on, like this is shifting with them. I know I didn't fall in love with being Black until I got into the 6th grade because I had an awesome Black at the time it was called social studies teacher who I'm talking about, she took us to Sylvia's. She made us fall in love with our culture, right? But could you imagine if I did that when I was in pre-K or nursery school back then when we call it, I know I'm dating myself, but right? Like the one-offs can't happen, Alexa, and you're absolutely right. And the children do look at us like, okay, she's just, what's wrong with her, right? But they'll love coming to your class though. If the world was open and we were back into our traditional setting, right? Where they had more of a time to be like, okay, I can relate more with this teacher because we're close. But it just, I don't know. It's a lot. And have a lot of work to do. And Keisha, you had hit on a lot of different things. And what we want to also ask is, we talked about, you know, representation in academics. Let's talk about the importance of social justice in education, right? Because we can't just have representation without social justice. I see you smiling over there, Kaya. What you thinking? It's twirling.
I think that that is a mistake that we have made for many years. And Dr. Claude Anderson had said that in order to identify historical patterns, one must know history. And we keep making the same mistakes and we have the blueprint. And that mistake is when we say social justice. You cannot get social justice without economics. You can't do that. It doesn't work. So, and this is a mistake many of our leaders, and it's not to knock them. They did the best that they could in the 60s. I have the benefit, we all have the benefit of hindsight to look at what was done. So I don't want to sound like I'm just harping on them, but there was some who spoke about this, like El Haj. And I happen to be one who agreed with a lot of what Malcolm was saying at that time. So, and King later realized, I don't want to discredit Martin, he later realized later in his life that he had to start working on these economic programs in order to get social justice for us. And we saw the tide turn. We saw things, they killed him. they killed him. He was no longer that friendly Negro that I have a dream, Martin, that everyone resonated with everyone. So I think, wait a minute, sweetheart. So as far as social justice in education, I think we have to, as you said, Keisha, the resources, and even going back before Brown versus Board of Ed, there was Briggs versus Elliott and out of South Carolina. And that's how Brown versus Board of Ed, those are how these other things happen. And essentially what it was Black children didn't have any buses to go to school. They didn't have the basic resources to go to school during segregation. And we did have Black teachers teaching kids, but you have to realize you don't have these basic resources to learn. We call it now adverse childhood experiences. So think about that. If we don't have the money to give to these households and you're living in poverty, how can I expect a child who is experiencing, have adverse affections, who's living in the garrisons and seeing violence and worrying about just putting on clean clothes to go to school and, okay, now sit down in front of the teacher, go out there and be somebody. It doesn't work. It's not going to happen. These are things that a lot of our politicians don't wish to acknowledge. They don't wish to talk about. They create these, they obfuscate things, they create these specious arguments, and they say, well, it's a problem with you people because once again, you can't get on board with everyone else. So I am a firm believer that before we can get these social justice, we have to really start worrying about economics and what we have been deprived for so long. And that's another issue that I don't want to sway off on, but we have a lot of Black and white, but let's stick to the Black elected officials who would purport to represent Black people. And the trade-off in I will support your vote is now a hollow symbolic victory.
Yeah.
And we stay in the same, it's a catch-22. We don't go anywhere. Nothing happens. So that's what I think economics, along with social justice, will get us where we need to go.
And I've had the pleasure of being both in a charter school and I'm a New York City teacher. And, before it's like, achievement gap. But going off of what you said, Kaya, like, I don't believe in achievement gap. Based on what I've seen, I've witnessed, and I experienced, there is an opportunity gap, right? It's not an achievement gap because what I saw children do from the ages of 5 up until I want to say 10, because they were given the resources and their family were giving the resources, they excelled beyond measure. Now, when I shift to a district school, it's like they don't have those same resources. So it's not that they can't do the work or they can't achieve this level of whatever we're, putting them up against. They don't have the resources. So it's an opportunity gap. So economics is important in this conversation. You hit that on the head. Whew. This is a lot to unpack.
Yeah, something else that is sticking out to me right now is and this has always been something that's followed me through undergrad and grad school, 2 times grad school. It's always kind of followed me through it. Okay, multifaceted. Is actually the power of language,
Mm.
how the power of messaging. And Kaya, when you mentioned that social justice is something that is not going to be achieved, yet all we do is preach about social justice, and we're not talking about the other forms of justice that will help propel social justice. It just reminds me how important language is and messaging is, because we all know that society, or the people's values and beliefs, is the most difficult thing to change. That's something that will take, we clearly know in America, it hasn't, that the values and beliefs of our country has not changed, because that is the most difficult thing to change. So if we're trying to drill in this idea of social justice, it really is something that is really unachievable, unattainable. And it's just a goal it's a lofty goal that gives you energy and makes you feel good, but it might be something that has no real, end goal. Because how do you change society without understanding economics, education? I mean, what else? Economics, education, consciousness, all those other kinds of things is what eventually lead and push that social change that we are all looking for. So you brought up some really, really great points there.
Whew. So now, we're teachers, we're educators, we are people who are trying to shake things up. We are the people who are in the classroom that they was telling us to be quiet. I'm gonna call your mother, right? Don't do that again. Or maybe they're sending you to the classroom next door. We all had one of those experiences, right? What is truth telling curriculum to you guys? And how do you envision it to be in schools? Like, how do you envision teachers to come into the school to not save our children, right? But to understand our children and to work on the same playing field to get there. What is truth telling curriculum to you, and how do you envision it?
Before we even start talking about truth-telling curriculum, we can't have truth-telling curriculum without addressing the disconscious educators that are entering the education system. So you got the truth-telling curriculum all you want, but who's behind it pushing the truth-telling curriculum? Like, who are we playing with? Like, who's playing these games? So, and I think that it's so much work that has to be done. I don't even know where to start. Like, the reality is education, teacher preparation programs and educational leadership preparation programs aren't preparing educators to come into the system to do this work. So on top of teaching children how to read, teaching children how to do mathematics, we have educators that are entering the system, denying our children the opportunity to be who they are and show up as they are, right? Yes. And that's why I've always even hated, when I think back to language and I think back to the code switching, and I've always hated it. I understood why it was done, but why isn't my language as acceptable in mainstream language as standard English?
That's right.
I'm gonna tell you one thing: standard English didn't stop George Floyd from being killed, because he plainly said, "I can't breathe," and it did nothing for him.
That's right.
It didn't help Trayvon Martin when he said, "Why are you following me?" That is standard English. I think we have to, and I feel like I'm all over, because I have so many things that I want to touch on. Like, I'm hot. I'm all over the place.
Black Ed Talks. Welcome to Black Ed Talks.
Yes, we get it popping up in here.
I think that we have to stop talking about curriculum until we could get to the hearts and minds of the educators that are in the system pushing the curriculum, right? Because the curriculum wouldn't be so much of an issue if we had woke educators that looked in the book and said, wait a minute, they're starting Black history talking about the slave trade. Oh no, I need to bring them back to civilizations where we had universities in Africa, where we had developed civilizations, we had governments and systems of irrigation. We had, like, so I don't think the truth-telling curriculum is so much the issue as it is the truth-telling educators that we need. Right?
Girl, I need all these snaps. Woo!
But I am for truth-telling curriculum. I'm for that too. So,
but you hit it right on the nose, right? And that is one of BU's actionable items. Getting these trainings into for the educators who are coming in and teaching our children. They need to be educated in a certain way on how to deal with our children. We don't need them to come into our communities to save our children. We just need you to be a part of their growing. That's it. We don't need to be saved. We here. We good. Woo. Y'all, I don't know about the two of y'all. Y'all about to start a revolution up on this Zoom.
Well, I would it's funny that you bring that up, and this is what we see going on in New York City from and not just New York City, across America. And I brought that example up, what happened to me in high school. And this is what it is. You essentially expecting the majority of white female teachers to come in and teach our children and teach them an accurate portrayal of history. One, they don't know it. Most of them don't know it. And two, even if they did know it, they're not going to teach it. They championed this book at Henry Highland Garnet, and I actually purchased it. I don't know if they thought that I was going to read it, but it is Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. And some things I liked in the book, some things I didn't like. Some of the things that I did like and I wanted to cite on was the imposed biases. You're asking people, and this is not just in the teaching profession, you're asking teachers to teach your children, and they're taking the view of the world from their view, from their perspective, and they are imposing this onto people that they don't know. They don't go in our neighborhoods. They don't know our culture. They might think they do, and if they might do, they misunderstand. They were talking about languages. You said language. There are Black children from different cultures, and here's an example. The child was at the back of the room sharpening a pencil, and the teacher says, "You want to have a seat now and let's get class started?" He said no, turned around and kept sharpening his pencil. The teacher immediately says, "Go to the principal's office." He has no clue what he did wrong. That's that language. See, to them in America, that is sarcasm. That she should have known that he was saying it wasn't a question, it was rhetorical. In that student's culture, he has no clue that she's being smart, insisting that you should take a seat now, and that use of language. Do you see that disconnect that we constantly have? And in terms of the demographics, they're not even hiring a lot of Black teachers. I do know personally, example, in Boys High School, my old football coach told me that the principal there, they really disliked. You want to know why they disliked him? Because this man is a genius. He was hiring students that graduated from the school, and he was telling them upon graduating, listen, if you pursue education, I'm going to come back here and hire you. And I'm being told that about 75 to 80% of the staff were his students who were working for him, that are from the neighborhood. They're walking a couple of blocks to go to work. And that's a beautiful thing. And if we had more of that, then we would see a lot of the results change, because they don't like him because he has so much control over what's being taught, what should be taught in these classrooms. So we're asking, and this is not a knock on them, they're looking for a job. We're asking a lot of white liberals, non-Black people coming from Wisconsin, Nebraska, the Midwest, to now come into urban schools and to accurately teach history. They don't know anything about the slave codes. They don't know anything about what happened during Jim Crow. They know what's on the news. And then for those Black people that are there, well, listen, you have modern day meritorious manumission that happens. And if you don't know what meritorious manumission, that was back during the 1600s, where Black people were rewarded. The only way for them to get their freedom was to be rewarded by turning in or telling on another slave. They would be rewarded by saving the life of their master. Anything that elevated the status or preserved racism and or white supremacy. And there was only a handful of white people who wasn't with it. You would even get punished if you were white and got caught teaching a black person to read. Harper's Ferry, John Brown, Virginia, they erected a statue of the black man who told on John Brown's cavalry coming into town. That is meritorious manumission. And all you have to do is look on TV, Roland Martin. We got a lot of meritorious manumission going on today, modern day meritorious manumission with black folks. So these are some things that we need to really address that go outside of the scope of education. It's all connected. It's all intertwined.
Yeah, it is.
But we have to be wanting to roll up our sleeves and do the work. And I believe everyone on this panel tonight is really ready to do that work.
Yes.
Tanya, I don't even have no sleeves on. That's how ready I am.
Yes, we all got on short sleeves tonight.
I don't have no sleeves.
And you know what's so funny is I am like the old principal. The school that I am working in right now, I graduated from. It is in the community that I grew up in. My son graduated from. And it was my mission to make sure that I am in the community that birthed me, that raised me, that made me who I am, right? Because we have to give back. And when I was in a charter school within my district, people didn't understand how I can relate to the families, how I can relate to the children. I'm like, because I am them. And I remember sitting in a meeting one day and it was like, district schools are bad. Just trying to divide the whole mindset of charter is better and district is worse. And I got up and I'm like, wait a minute. I never went to a charter school. So you have public school students teaching in your charter school. So what's really bad? I'm not understanding. We're good enough to teach in your charter school, but you want us to tell the people in our neighborhoods to not go to public schools. Why? I'm a product of it, right? So it is a lot of mindset, a lot of disproving a lot of things that they taught us and holding people accountable, right? Because a lot of teachers, young white teachers, they graduate from school, they go through these programs and they think that teaching, they actually learn how to teach through this textbook. No. First of all, that textbook is mad old to begin with because the teacher who's teaching you didn't update their curriculum, number one. Number two, you can't learn how to relate to someone through this book. Mm-hmm. And if you're not willing to step back and say, you know what, let me understand them, let me know, let me walk through this community and say hi. I remember I was walking with a colleague and she was like, you know everyone. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm just respectful. When I see someone, I speak, hey, good day. Because if something is happening to me and those people are walking by, I would want them to say, hey, are you good? That's the teacher who always speaks to us. But you got your head up high. You can't speak to nobody, but you in our neighborhoods. Girl, bye.
Well, I definitely want to chime in here because I have a different perspective. I am a transplant. I'm not from here. I'm from Florida originally. So I am not. Well,
pork and beans project.
What'd you say?
I said pork and beans project.
I'm a vegan, so no pork, but maybe the beans.
No, that's pork and beans project. That's an area in Miami.
Oh, see, I'm not from that part of Florida, so I couldn't say that. Listen, I'm from West Palm Beach. So I come from a different perspective because, and I'm one of those people who went through a teacher's program, right? I'm one of those people, I have to be honest, I had to re-educate my own self, like on our own history, on what it actually meant to go into a classroom filled with Black students, right? I can honestly say that I honestly don't know what I thought going in there. But what I learned through the process was the more that I became authentically myself and being comfortable with being authentically myself, I then was able to make better connections with the students that I was teaching. Not being from New York, not, really understanding, what's really going on here. Honestly, I'm a special educator. Through my teaching program, they don't teach you curriculum. They don't teach you the history you're supposed to teach. They just teach you, as a special educator, you're just supposed to go in and know. You're just supposed to go in and be able to be good at everything. And so I'm teaching U.S. history. And I think what made me so passionate about what I'm teaching was that I was learning alongside the students. I didn't know what the Black codes were until I taught it and I read it. And I was like, yo, this is wild. That gave me the passion to go in and say, like, yo, do you understand why law is written the way that it's written? So now that I have gotten this in-depth perspective of this, I can now bring that passion to the students and have those different kinds of conversations. So, I can definitely agree with you all, like, teaching programs do not prepare you for the classroom at all. They actually don't really prepare you for any of this.
That's right.
You're just thrown into the lion's den. And if you figure it out, you figure it out. If you don't, then maybe you could still keep your job because we need teachers. So, I mean, I did not think that this question would go the way in which it's going, but I think that we're having a really beautiful conversation because we're touching on so many different things from like, oh my goodness, from like outside of education and bringing it back into, what our students are learning. It's really amazing. And just to kind of get back to the question in terms of truth-telling curriculum, and the reason why I thought of this question is because when I started teaching US history and even global history, at first I came in like, oh, we only should teach these students about like Black things. I teach predominantly Black and Latino students. Only Black and Latino things, the only thing we should teach them. And then I had to come to the understanding, like, that's not the truth. We have to teach them the different perspectives. We have to teach them every single thing, every single perspective of one event so they can come to their own understanding, their own truth about what really happened, their own conclusions. And so I think that, one, I agree with you. If somebody isn't coming into the academic space with this mindset, then they're definitely going to impose their own biases and not talk about it the way they're supposed to talk about it and grade, give you the 2-week in February lesson on Black history, which I got all my life until college. And I decided to dive in and learn more about my own history.
Right.
So, if you don't have those kinds of teachers who are empowered to do that, which is why I agree with you, if you're not empowered to actually dig into the curriculum and learn and figure out what the truth is, what you should be teaching the students, it doesn't matter. I can hand you the book, but that doesn't mean you're going to teach the word correctly. Ooh.
That's right.
Everyone is an educator here, right?
Mhm.
Everyone is an educator. You said that you weren't from New York. I will never fault anyone. You're born and you grew up where you grew up.
Right.
It is what it is. But you were willing to learn,
That's right.
willing to do the work to teach children. And I was going to ask, but you already answered it. They essentially just throw you right in.
Yes.
Now, that is something that the DOE never wants to address. You are taking unprepared teachers and you're telling them, go out there and teach the most difficult or highly problematic children to learn. And once you've been thrown to the wolves, you've been tatted up, you've been beaten around, and after maybe, I don't know, 5 years or whatever, you got the hang of it, right? Then those teachers, some, once they get tenure, they're looking to get out of there and move somewhere else. And then they're looking to get the easier children to handle. In any other profession, education is the only profession that does that. Could you imagine in the medical field? That would be malpractice. If you would take a student fresh out of med school and put them with the most difficult cancer or diseases that the top doctors couldn't solve and say, hey, go run in there.
Yep.
And then you will put the seasoned doctors with the most routine general practice people getting the same money.
They got codes, so we're gonna put those with the codes.
That's absurd. Education is the only profession that they do that. And
right,
it needs
and who
to stop.
suffers? So if you, like with the scenario you gave, if that teacher walks away after 5 years, right? That means they had 150 students if they're teaching a regular classroom. So they touch the lives of 150 children, right? And who is left to help those children? Because they didn't know. The children don't know that they don't know. The parents don't know that they don't know, right? And we're all just in this cycle of, no, you go to school, you learn what the teacher says is right, and I'm not going to question it. No.
So, you know what? I want to touch on something Mr. Royal said, right? And it's not to say that, well, let me just go on. I don't think there's a teacher that enters the education field saying, I'm here to harm children. That's not the case. An educator is entering the system because they truly do believe that, and this is also an assumption because I don't know, but I'm assuming that they're entering the field saying, you know what, I want to make a difference. I want to help students. I want to support students, and I want to help them learn. But because programs aren't addressing what they need to address, like Mr. Royal said, they do enter the system not prepared to really have an open mind to different perspectives and listening to student voice and so forth, right? So then the responsibility is upon the leadership within the school to ensure that the educators are getting the support that they do receive. And that's why a dope administrator such as myself, that's the work that we're about, right? Because we do see these things happening and we do realize. So we have to use what is within our sphere of influence to really shape the minds of our educators so that they can touch all of the students that come through our school community. But what happens when you have an educator or an administrator that is also disconscious, right? That's where the true problem lies. So I think I don't know what the answer is, but I know that educators themselves have to kind of, and that's why I love Dr. Yolanda Ruiz's work, right? Because she talks about the importance of archaeology of self and really getting to know, because I've even spoken with white educators that say, you know what, I feel like this is my fault. I feel uncomfortable when we're talking about these. And without doing that archaeology of self, being a white educator, even because we can't act like Black people don't also have privilege and also harms, because some of the craziest things that I've heard, and some of the harm that I know happens from educators of color as well.
Yes.
Right. So I think it's important that I just think it's important that as educators and as administrators, we're all continually doing the work and helping to uncover these implicit biases and really working to develop that racial literacy so we can get rid of being reflexive when these issues come up and not feeling like we're victims, but yet taking control of the situation and really working to educate our students. So even though they come into the system unprepared, I believe it's the job of administration and school districts and so forth to really help teachers develop that racial literacy so they can do that work with their students. Do you feel what I'm saying, Mr. Royal and team?
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Can you elaborate?
I'm
I
sorry?
wanted you to elaborate on the privilege that you felt that Black teachers had.
So, like for myself.
I was gonna say I could elaborate on that too.
For myself, Mr. Royal, I'm not afraid to admit it. I was like, oh, I need to get in here. I got to save these kids because they not doing right. Look at the way they speak, look at the way they dress. And I was doing it from a place of, I know what it takes to make it in mainstream America. So I have to go in there and save them. And what I was actually doing was also denying them the right to be who they were. So when I speak about being Black and coming from a place of privilege, I was going in with my own. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Or is that not considered privilege? I don't, because that's what I think of it as. But I mean, I'm still learning too. So,
but to add on to that and to give Mr. Royale another picture of it, right? Like Black and African American, teachers also go into these school buildings with the spirit of fear, right? And that spirit of fear comes from the administration over them, because sometimes it's a I got you moment, right? It's not a let me develop you moment. It's a I got you. Let me see, because if you don't believe in what I believe in, then this isn't going to work. And then when you have a teacher who is fearful, they are not being them their true selves, so then they in turn hinder the children in the classroom from being their true selves and actually learning in a way that will benefit them most. Right? So we have so much going on in a school building before we can even open up a textbook and get in front of children, right? Because a lot of administrators don't believe that they need to develop their staff. And I agree, Keish, we've all went into places like, you know what, because I'm the Black teacher in this building, right? I'm going to make the difference. They're going to say, I want to go to her classroom.
That's it right there, Mr. Real. That's an example. Oh, but so that's an example, right? And I call it privilege, right? Because I'm now walking into a building. I'm Black, so I know. I'm Black, so I know what's best for these children. And in that way, also denying them the right, because I'm not listening to them. I'm not listening to what they need. I'm here to impose what I think they need. And that's what I mean when I say coming from a place of privilege. But what were you thinking, Mr. Royal?
No, I wasn't thinking anything. I didn't want to assume. I was trying to understand, because we all know when we hear privilege, we know what we
automatically think of.
I don't know if I would use the word privilege.
Okay.
But disconnect between the generations of Black people, because what see the difference is, if I say privilege and someone is using their privilege in a traditional sense, they're using their privilege, they're not doing it with any good intentions for me. They're not saying, hey, you need to do it like this and you'll see positive results. No, they're doing it to benefit them. It's very selfish. So whereas the example that you gave, if I'm coming into something and you're saying, well, I'm not listening to these Black kids because I know what they need. Granted, you are correct. I don't think that it should be done like that, but I also have to acknowledge it's coming from a place that you want to see the best for these people. There lies the difference between the two. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily call it that. It is something that we should work on and address. I do agree with that.
I love where this is going right now. And I love that you talked about the development of self. I have learned so much about myself as a teacher. I came in my school like, I'm coming in, I'm Miss Blackity Black. I'm gonna do everything I can to show y'all that I'm Black AF. Every time you talk to me, every time a student talks to me, a teacher, whatever, you're gonna know what my position is on all of this, and it's super Black all the time. And I'm lucky enough that I was able to actually come in that way. But even coming in that way does not allow space for students to develop that themselves. And so I definitely, had to peel back layers and layers and layers of myself in order to understand where is all this coming from. And I think being an educator or having interest in education, you have to be deeply self-reflective, and you have to be ready to do that inner work of yourself, because what you reflect on the inside is what is going to be projected on whoever that you're speaking to or that you're trying to educate. And so I think that's something that is often looked over. I was very lucky in my graduate program to have a teacher who was actually a Black woman, one of my favorite teachers, who told us that, listen, this is a deeply self-reflective, you have to do the self-work before you step into this classroom, because if you don't know who you are, you cannot lead students to figure out who they are, because you are lost yourself. And I think that maybe if that was integrated in these teaching programs, if that is integrated in these professional developments within our school buildings, we might also be able to see that turnaround. I think that so often we try to project the help on the students that we forget about the person who is in the classroom. We have to understand who we are, and that is not a linear journey, and that is not something that happens. I know myself today because you change every 5 to 7 years. So you have to constantly be willing to dive into those depths of who you are, the dark spaces of who you are, because until you can step into that classroom as your authentic self, everything. The students are going to really be able, and when I first heard that students will be able to see if you're being authentic or not, I thought like, okay, well, yeah, if like you're walking around like, yo kids, what's good? Like, you know, they're definitely be able to see like this teacher, you know, is trying to connect with me, this, that, and the third. But I think that it's even deeper than that.
Yeah.
I think that it's even deeper than that. If that a student can't see that you know who you are, you can't shake this foundation. You know, if they can see that your foundation is shaky, that you still lost in the woods, they just gonna continue to lead you astray because they don't want to learn.
That's right.
So you got to be solid in yourself. Okay, y'all done turned this conversation upside down, inside out. This was we was trying to do a good 30 to 45 minutes, and we coming up on an hour. But I think it was such an engaging conversation that we had. And the last question that we want to ask, because yes, we're having a conversation, but I think that this is still a learning space. We should still be able to provide resources to the people that are listening to us and even to one another. Like you talking about the archaeology of self. I'm gonna need you to send me that.
Yes, look.
That name or whatever, so that I can look into that, because that sounds really interesting. And so what we want to know is, where should educators who want to immerse themselves in this type of work, where should they begin? Or what types of resources would you be able to share with people who are like, yo, like, maybe I don't know myself. Maybe I'm not as educated on what I'm supposed to be doing in the classroom as I should be. Where should these people start? If you can find a place, because I know it's many.
Where should they start? No, real talk. I think like Mr. Royal said, like we also, like you even just beautifully articulated for us, that the work has to begin with self. You cannot help people to develop an understanding of who they are. You cannot help them to develop critical consciousness without recognizing who you are, right? So, and this is I'm going to shout her name from the mountaintops. Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz. She does this work called archaeology of self. It's like an excavation of what implicit biases do you hold, and how do they shape who you are and the way that you interact with the world and the people around you. So I would say that is definitely a great resource in terms of getting started with this work as as a person, as a human being. I would say that's one. A powerful book, which was recommended by my professor, Dr. Wade. When I tell you why representation matters, this is my 4th or 5th degree. Whatever number this is. No, 1, 2. This is my 4th degree. And besides my time as an undergrad in HBCU, this is the first Black female professor that I've ever had. And when I tell you, she walked in as her true self and just game changing. So representation matters. But she put me onto this book. I believe it was, the author's name is Molly Chugg, I believe. I can't remember. Give me a second, I'll be able to think of it. But those were 2 great resources that really helped me a lot. Oh, I know what the book is called. Something about discovering the bias in you.
Ooh.
Molly Chugg, I think the author's name is. If my phone wasn't dead, I would look it up, but I think that's the author's name.
All right. Listen, we got some heavy reading to do.
Right, Mr. Royal, you got something for the people to read. I feel like
I know,
yes,
and yours as well. It's like you guys.
I know you do.
No, I ain't got nothing. No, I'm just playing. I actually do. I think. See, when I say, and I make a lot of these videos and I put them up and work on the channel, my channels and speak this truth. It makes a lot of Black folks angry with what they have traditionally believed. And The first author that I mentioned his name before, but you should just buy his entire package, is Dr. Claude Anderson. I have every one of his books, from Black Labor, White Wealth to Dirty Little Secrets 1 and 2 to the Black History Reader.
Hold that one up again. Okay.
This is the Black History Reader. This is Black Labor, White Wealth, Powernomics.
Hope I write it down because I can't find my pen.
As soon as you put in Dr. Claude Anderson, you will see the package. He will have all of these books. So I think that, and the reason why, well, let me just rewind. The reason why I respect Dr. Claude Anderson so much, and if you listen to him, he is saying something totally different than what we have been taught. He is taking what Malcolm has said to another level in teaching us the truth. So for example, what can educators, what can people do to better prepare themselves? I no longer use and this is for me, I don't use the terms people of color. I don't do that, and I'm going to tell you why I don't do that. When you know history, you can see the game that is ran on us. In the late 60s, they implemented a policy under the Nixon administration called benign neglect. And you shifted from when they could no longer use Black folks as a labor force, well, we had to now maintain them as a permanent underclass. And so we can't outright do that. So what is benign neglect? So anytime Black folks will fight specifically for Black rights, we will now make it ambiguous and use words as people of color, minorities, everyone, to make it all inclusive, to never specifically address the wrongs that have been done against Black people in this country. Native Americans were very complicit in enslaving Black people, the 5 civilized tribes. The only exception to that was the Seminole tribe fighting Andrew Jackson in Florida. They were very complicit in that. When we give people and address their rights and their needs in this country, we say Native American rights are for Native Americans, even though they violated the 1806 Native American Treaty. We say LGBTQ rights are for LGBTQ. We say women's rights are for women's rights. We are very specific in what we say. But when we say Black folks, we say, oh, civil rights, everybody, or minorities. Just look at what's going on right now. Stop Asian hate. Asian people, they don't say minorities. They don't say everyone. They're very, very specific in what they're doing. So we have to understand the way the game works. We have to focus on being aggregate amongst ourselves. And the term that Dr. Anderson uses is ethno-aggregate, coming together amongst ourselves the same way that every other race does. Asians are aggregate amongst Asians. Jews are aggregate amongst Jews. General white folks are aggregate amongst themselves. And a lot of the lighter Hispanics are aggregate amongst themselves. As soon as Black folks try to do something and get together, it's called hate. You're being divisive. You're against us. So we must do the reading to properly identify ourselves and familiarize ourselves with history. And now we can find better solutions and policies going forward. No other group, no other race, no other ethnic was specifically excluded in the Constitution to not benefit from this country. I will not allow other fabricated, oppressed minorities to equate their plight to that of Black people in America. When you do that, it trivializes our fight and it makes it obscure. And this is a game that has been ran since the beginning of time. We need more people like Claude Anderson. We need more people like Dr. Francis Crisis Sweat with the ISIS papers.
Yeah. Okay,
these are people that are going to tell it like it is.
Let me see that last one.
This is the ISIS papers.
Listen, we're gonna have to do a whole.
Okay, so you got the book. So you got the book as well.
I don't have that one. That one is new to me.
Listen, I started reading this in undergrad, and honestly, I didn't get past the first chapter and a half because I was like, oh my God. I'm gonna need
She
to
is
sit
very
down and really
different.
read
Drop
this.
that in the chat. Drop that in the chat. As a matter of fact, drop that in the mailbox. Because
Yes.
I need that. If you only on chapter 1, you might as well send that.
But
Listen,
this is very, and I'm sorry if I'm babbling. I apologize. But this is something. This is a different story because they keep playing games with us for so long, trying to confuse Black folks on what the issues are. So we have to start looking at people who's really telling the truth. We call everything racism. No other race experiences racism. Dick Gregory spoke about that. Discrimination, bigotry, hatred, prejudices are not racism. They are not the same thing. You have to understand how racism became a thing and know its history to know that racism is a relationship between white and Black folks. That's what it is. And people are going to say, well, what do you mean? When you treat somebody wrong and prejudice and you do things on your feelings, that is not racism, because people don't know the history of how it started. So these are all things that we have to know the truth, that I had to do the research because these are the games that they play with us. And you keep going around in circles, never actually solving the real issue. And if you know the right leaders to follow of our past, some of them are martyrs, and if you know the right books to read, then you can say, this is the game. I'm seeing the way that this is played. I think it's high time. It's too long that we are always the last ones to the table. We're always the last ones to get it. No, not anymore. No.
Especially not when we build in the table.
Yes, exactly.
We build the table and walk away and then wait for them to invite us back. Craziness.
Please, if you don't mind, put the name of that in the chat because I'm
gonna do it right now.
I'm dead over. I'm a fish out of water over here.
listen, that's some knowledge right there. That's some knowledge right there.
Yeah.
That's some knowledge right there.
All right. You learn something new every day. Like we said, this is a ongoing thing.
Right. Like we said, if you want to elevate others, you got to elevate yourself. And these are the things we got to read and dive into and discuss together in order to elevate ourselves and who we are. The knowledge, the history is in the books. The knowledge is in the books. Y'all got me speechless, honestly.
Same. I'm like, wow. So this is not how we expected this to go.
Oh, really? What were y'all expecting?
But this has been, when we came on, we are weighed down with our day, right? But now by the end of it, I am just
re-energized over here. I'm
like floating because I know I'm not alone, right? I know that me and Alexa are not the only ones feeling this, wanting change and thriving to make it happen, right? I'm so excited to be around like-minded people, right? Though we may not agree on everything, these Jews that have been trapped, we are all on the same road, right? And we are all we are all a different part of the automobile that is going to drive us to where we need to bring education. I am so appreciative of you guys. You just don't even know.
Yes. And this is really the whole purpose of Black Ed Talks, is to have these different types of conversations. Go ahead, Ms. Green.
I was about to say, nothing against Mr. Royal, but our next topic has to be about Black women. Okay?
I have a lot to contribute. Don't worry, I'm not Kevin Samuels.
I was saying in my head, we need a part 2 because right here, this conversation is so deep and needed, right? It doesn't only benefit the teachers, but it'll also benefit the students and the parents because they get a different perspective of the teacher in the classroom.
Right. And honestly, it shined a light on how interconnected education is. I feel like very often education is kind of like the stepchild in society. It's just over there. We don't think that it's really something that you know, is what brings everything together. And this conversation really showed how every single thing is linked back to what takes place in that classroom. Everything.
Can you imagine how disheartening it is when you hear educators saying that it's not their responsibility to talk about race and racism and power structures? Can you imagine how disheartening it is to go on social media and have parents come on my page and say, oh, I don't want you poisoning the mind of my children about race, and I sent them to school to be educated? Well,
Teaching is a political act. That's something
Let's talk
that
about the
I
Holocaust
also,
stuff.
that's
Right.
Teaching is a political act. Everything we do is political. And until the majority of people understand that every step we make is a political act, you know, we can't stay in the fluff. We can't stay in the, oh, we're just here to teach 1 + 1. No, teaching is a political act. Everything we do in the classroom is teaching. Walking down the hallway is teaching. Everything you do is a political act. And that's why I'm appreciative of Black Edfluencers-United for, you know, allowing us this platform to do this on. I'm thankful for you two for coming on and dropping that knowledge. I definitely think we're gonna have to find a space for y'all to come back one way or another, because this was hot fire.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hey, hold on. Y'all wouldn't even believe it. My pen has been sitting here. I don't know what is going on with me, but my pen was sitting here, right over here, off to the side, next to my tangerines, and I finally found it, and I didn't even realize it. I need the name of that book, sir, please.
The ISIS papers.
ISIS papers, yes. But you know what? You weren't supposed to find your pen because you needed to be engulfed in what was being said so that you can take it back. So when you're reading the book now, you will be like, I remember that point. I know that. And this is how it connects.
I'm sitting here thinking, like, what would a book club with that book look like?
Girl, you started and we there. Started and we there.
Before we close out, everybody, is there anything that y'all want to plug? Anything that people should be looking forward to? I know, Kaya, you had mentioned YouTube or show, so let the people them know what you're doing, that they should look out for, and then we'll wrap it right on up.
Well, I don't want to go to it. I haven't launched it yet, but I'm working on launching my own platform for my videos, empowering Black people. But you can probably, if you Google me, the bodybuilding pictures will come up. But that's not. I don't just pick things up and lift things down. But if you go to my Facebook or Instagram, you will certainly see plenty of my content. A lot of my videos where I am genuinely, I'm trying to take very convoluted, difficult to understand topics and make them very simple for our people to understand. And if you go, wow, I never knew that, then I consider that a victory. I consider that job is done, job well done.
So your IG is your name?
It's my first and last name, Kaya Royal, Kaya, last name Royal, Royal.
All right, I'm gonna look
on Facebook or Instagram, and I will put once I launch the YouTube pages in the company, I'll put that up in due time.
All right.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be a guest tonight. Thank you so much
for joining us. I know you're in a room with some women, you know.
Yeah, this little lady.
Multifaceted. We're all over the place doing things, but you held your own and you showed us some things. And
yeah, she's playing with Daddy's money now. As I see it's laying out on the bed. Come here. You want to say hi?
Yes.
Okay, come here.
Proud.
You're never shy. Would you like to say hi?
Hi.
What is your name?
Hi.
Lisi, and that's your name?
Yeah, and I take your money so I can borrow
Oh,
it.
okay.
That's right.
That's right, girl. Get that money.
That's right. That's right. Look, you hurried up and put that down.
Ms. Green, is there anything you wanna plug in for yourself before we wrap up?
Well,
that's right.
Is a must. His name was Quincy, is a must in homes and schools across America. So if you know a way to help me get it into schools across America, please let me know, because I truly do believe it's an important text. It's a relevant text. It's reflective of the times, and it's truly written by us for us, but truly appropriate for anyone as a great way to start those conversations. And that's about it. I'm on social media at JDX Publishing. You can follow there to learn more about what I'm doing and, what's up.
All right, people, that was episode number 2 of Black Ed Talk. Again, we want to thank our guests for coming through. Listen, this is only episode number 2.
Right.
So we got a whole bunch more hot fire coming for you all every month. Check us out. We'll be here on Facebook Live, 7 p.m. If you miss us live, don't worry. We'll definitely put this up on the YouTube so that you can definitely rewind and pause and write down any new knowledge that you gain from these conversations we have with educators in all parts of the sphere. So from my living room to your living room, thank you all so much for joining us, and we will see you all next time.